In this video, I'll be creating a winter camouflage paint scheme and a small snowy base for the clear prop Lavochkin La-5. For this, I'm trying out a few AK products I haven't used before. I started the build by assembling the very small photo-etched brass parts. Both of Clear Prop's La-5 kits so far are advanced editions, meaning they're recommended mainly for experienced modelers due to the large number of tiny parts. The cockpit plastic is nicely detailed, and the PE parts allow you to add even more detail to the controls, instrument panel, seat, and pedals. I'll try to show it here. After gluing the tiny parts in place, I airbrushed the cockpit with AKRC 909 medium blue-gray. It's almost the same color as the bare plastic. Later, it looked a bit too dark to me, so I painted the landing gear in a lighter gray instead. For this project, I used almost only AK products. This isn't a promotion. It just turned out that way. It was also my first time trying the AK Acrylic Markers, and I found them really handy for painting the smaller parts. I haven't managed to get a nice finish on larger surfaces with them yet, but they're perfect for small parts, and you don't have to clean any brushes afterward. I painted the cockpit and then gave it a wash with thinned black oil paint. The photo-etched parts in the kit allow you to build a nicely detailed cockpit. This time I didn't spend too much effort on weathering, since with the canopy closed, not much of it will be visible anyway. Before gluing the wings together, I need to drill these 4 holes for the bomb racks. The wings fit together quite well, so that part isn't a problem. However, the trailing edge is too thick, so I glued it with cyanoacrylate and then sanded it down to make it thinner. The fuselage halves fit together nicely, and the cockpit slid easily into place. However, at the wing fuselage joint, the seam line needs to be removed, since there's no panel line here on the real aircraft. Check out these flawless fits. Great work, Clear Prop. It's worth making a few modifications on the nose and wings. The seam lines need to be removed, and the correct panel lines should be scribed. While the primer dried, I assembled the photo-etched parts. Although the Lavochkin La-5 was primarily a fighter designed for air superiority, its proximity to the front meant it was sometimes used against ground targets with up to 150 kilograms of bombs. The kit includes 2 Fab 50 bombs, and I wanted to fit them because they look great on the aircraft. The kit includes PE parts for the landing gear doors and torque links. I glued the photo-etched brass parts with cyanoacrylate and removed the excess using debonder. Before priming, I coated them with Mr. Metal Primer to help the paint adhere better. There are 2 indentations on the doors that should be pressed in so they bulge out on the other side. Unfortunately, I forgot to do that. I had to restore some panel lines and rivets on the sides of the engine, cowling, and around the wing root. It's also worth adding the missing panel line on the underside of the wing. Well, I didn't want to talk through the whole video, as the main points were already clear. Based on my experience so far, I can only say good things about the new AK Real Color in its smaller bottles. I used it thinned with Mr. Leveling Thinner. The paint covers well, gives a smooth finish, and holds up nicely under masking. However, I didn't use Real Color for the dark tone of the camouflage. I painted that with Mr. Hobby Acrylic instead, since I found RC Rubber Black to be a bit too light. I painted the camouflage patches roughly, freehand. They don't need to be perfectly accurate, since the whole surface will be covered with white later. Only the chipped areas will remain visible. Some black paint accidentally oversprayed onto the elevator, but that's fine. It'll be covered by the white anyway. On these aircraft, the winter camouflage didn't really chip off. It wore away in small patches instead. Even so, I'll be using chipping fluid, but I'll need to tone down the effect later. I originally planned to paint the white using AK's third-generation water-based acrylic, but during testing, I couldn't quite achieve the worn effect I was aiming for. Here you can see my attempts. This paint might still be useful for other projects, but for the La-5, I decided to spray Real Color lacquer white over the chipping layer instead. Real Color covers much better than the washable acrylic, so the white layer stays thinner with fewer coats. I sprayed one layer less onto the rudder surfaces and only highlighted the ribs on them. I've often read that chipping fluid only works with acrylic paints, but you'll see in a moment that it also works nicely with lacquer. Based on the reference photos, I chipped the white paint in a few spots using a toothpick and a 1000 grit sanding sponge. In both cases, I worked dry, without water, to avoid removing too much or creating large flakes. After that, I applied a gloss coat, and once it dried, I was able to mask the panels around the exhausts. For the metallic stripes, I used masking tape and an AK Real Color marker. It looks just as good as if I'd painted them with regular metal paint. The clear prop decals are thin and easy to apply, but I used Tamiya decal adhesive to help the smaller stencils stick even better. The only downside to clear props decals is that they're packed very tightly on the sheet, so cutting them out was a bit tricky. After the decals had dried, I applied a panel line wash using a dark gray, mixed from Tamiya enamels and thinned with X20. I didn't want to emphasize the panel lines too much, so instead of a dark wash, I mixed a medium gray. It lightens slightly as it dries. Then I sprayed a matte coat, followed by the final 2 stages of the winter finish. First, I used an acrylic layered ink technique to simulate all kinds of dirt that would accumulate on the aircraft, in areas where the crew steps or where from the ground splashes up. I mixed a light gray wash and applied it to a surface dampened with thinner, adding a few drops of burnt umber here and there. Then I spread it all out using a stiff bristled stippling brush. Meanwhile, tiny fibers or hairs from the brush or who knows where can get stuck in the paint. You need to pick them out before the ink dries. Acrylic ink dries pretty quickly, so you only have time to shape the pattern while the thinner underneath is still wet. Using a sponge or different types of brushes creates different textures, and you can also vary the look by adjusting the amount of thinner you use. In one of my upcoming videos, I'll show another way to use the layered ink patina technique. If you'd like to learn more about it, check out Chris Sieber's Super Detailing F14 Tomcat publication. And always keep an eye out for those tiny fibers. I'm going to soften the effects so far using white oil paint. My favorite brand is Winsor & Newton Griffin Alkyd, a fast-drying oil paint. With this, I'll add another thin white layer and then wipe off the excess. Since the aircraft will be displayed on a snowy base, I'm simulating the snow stuck to the tires using white pigment powder. After wiping off the excess, the effect looks quite convincing. Next came the final assembly. The exhaust panels, landing gear, and propeller were all installed. I weathered the propeller using watercolor pencils. You'll see some close-up shots of that at the end of the video. For the underside of the Lavochkin, I applied the dirt and grime with pastel powders and a silicone brush. This method lets me control the effect more precisely when simulating spilled and smeared oil or fuel stains. Instead of the plastic pitot tube, I made a more realistic one using hypodermic needles. Finally, the last little parts to go on the model are the two red mechanical gear indicator pins. These pop up from the wings when the landing gear is extended. And with that, the winter camouflaged La-5 is basically finished. It just needs a base. I created the snowy terrain using AK snow paste, which I spread onto a wooden disc. The paste takes a few hours to dry, so there's plenty of time to shape the surface. I applied the paste to the wooden base with a spatula and smoothed it out. Then I shaped the surface using a wet brush. Once dry, the snow effect turns matte white and doesn't look very realistic on its own. To improve the appearance, it needs to be combined with other products. I sprinkled some simple baby powder over it to make it look more like real snow. My original idea was to apply the snow in a circular shape so that some of the bare wood would still show through. But my friends said it looked like a pancake or a cookie. Even my wife asked, "Hey, why don't you just cover the whole thing?" So I dropped my plan and went with her suggestion, which honestly tends to work out pretty well. So, here's the finished result. I deliberately didn't add any tire or footprints, since they don't appear on the reference photos either. Considering it's my first try at making snow, I'd say it turned out pretty well. The vignette looks a bit plain. But hey, it's an airfield. There aren't supposed to be any bushes or trees. Oh yeah, I don't have a fancy rotating display. I'll just show it in photos instead. What you can see next to the plane, though, is a bottle used for engine starting. I built and placed that beside the aircraft to break up the monotony a little. A few figures would definitely add to the composition, but they just didn't fit into this project this time. Well, that's it for this build. But don't forget that I also make models to order. If you like how I build and would like me to make an aircraft model for you, visit my website at modelbuilder.art. The link's in the description. Thanks for watching and see you in the next one.